Let me start off today's teaching and ask you this question. Have you ever had an experience that didn't match what you expected? Right? Like you were planning an experience, you were strategizing for it, you could imagine it, and then you entered into the experience and it didn't end up turning out the way that you expected at all. I mean, of course you have, right? I think all of us have experienced disappointment on some level where our experience didn't match our expectations. Maybe for some of you that happened when you moved here to San Francisco and you were trying to find an apartment. And that's always fun, is it not? And you're trying to find an apartment and you've been looking and looking and looking and finally you found one on Craigslist and the pictures looked good, the neighborhood seemed great, there was a coffee shop nearby that you could enjoy. And in the ad itself, the landlord said that this place was so charming. And it seemed charming. And then you showed up to the apartment ready just to sign as soon as you walked through the doors. And by charming, you realized that they meant you can sleep, eat, and use the bathroom without ever taking more than 3 steps. Can anyone relate? Here's a pro tip if you just moved here. If you ever see the word charming in an apartment ad, it means it's the smallest place you have ever experienced in your life. It's charming. I thought, though, maybe it would be different, right? Or I love seeing tourists. There's a few different ways you can spot a tourist in San Francisco. Of course, there's the obvious one. They're in those ridiculous yellow bumper cars rolling through, and you're stuck behind them and angry. That's one way. The second way, though, and this is maybe my favorite, is in June when you see people in short-sleeve shirts and shorts at Ocean Beach. And you're like, who's going to tell them? Who's going to tell them? Northern California is different than Southern California. They had no idea what they were getting themselves into. They thought it was going to be entirely different. Their expectation didn't match their experience. I was thinking this morning, those 2 words, I thought. Those are kind of interesting words. They're kind of dangerous words, actually, if you think about it. I thought. And they're dangerous because for many people, it creates a sort of doom loop in their life that they get stuck in. I thought. I thought I would be married by now. I thought being a parent would be different. I thought I'd be in a different place in my career. I thought I would be healed by now. I thought I would have moved on from that wound. I thought that relationship, that friendship was going to last forever. I thought I'd be in a different place in my finances. I thought I would be happier by now. And if you're not careful, those 2 words can create a sort of paralysis in your life if you don't find a way out of them. I thought. You see, there's going to be those moments where what you thought and what you experienced do not match. The question is, what do you do? Because there's going to be disappointment in your life. And I'm not going to stand up here and say, well, in the face of disappointment, so what? I'm not going to diminish it because disappointment is awful. It's hard. It's discouraging. So I'm not going to say, so what? But I am going to invite you to ask the question, now what? Like if you've experienced some disappointment where what you expected and what you've experienced are completely different things, and you're in this doom loop of I thought, today I want to ask the questions, now what? What are we going to do about it? And how do we move forward? And how do we find some freedom and some hope again in our lives? This is a message that maybe for some of you is going to be incredibly relevant right now. And if it's not, it will be relevant for you one day. Because disappointment, unfortunately, is sort of baked into life. It's a part of the deal. So how do we face it? And how do we move beyond it? And not only how do we move beyond it, how do we rise above it and be stronger on the other side? When my expectations for life and my experiences in life don't match, I found comfort in this quote from one of my favorite theologians and authors, Frederick Buechner. He once wrote this. He said, beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid. God is with you. Now, I know it sounds sort of heavy and dark. Beautiful things and terrible things will happen. But what I appreciate about these words is how honest they are about the life that I've lived, the life you've lived, the life we're all in the middle of right now. That life is full of beautiful things, and life will be full of terrible things, but we don't need to be afraid because God is with us in the midst of it all. And this matters in regards to our conversation on the book of Acts and being a family on mission, because we're entering this sort of new era in the story of the early church. For the first chapters 1 through 6 of Acts, the church is on a roll. Momentum seems to be on their side. Like they're together, they're gathered, they're one, they're unified, they're passionate. Jesus has risen from the dead. It feels like nothing can stop them. But then at the end of Acts chapter 7 and into Acts chapter 8, all of a sudden they enter into a new chapter, a chapter of persecution, a chapter of struggle, a chapter full of disappointment. And to understand where we're going today and how the church responded to it, we need to understand the promise that the church first had. Jesus gave this promise to the first followers of Jesus, and it was an extraordinary promise. It's in Acts chapter 1, verse 8. Maybe you've heard this verse before, but if not, it'll be on the screen. In Acts chapter 1, verse 8, Jesus tells his first followers, he says, "You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." And this was an incredible, incredible promise for people who could not imagine a world outside of their own territory, outside of their own boundaries and borders. And yet Jesus was saying, what I'm going to do through you will actually go beyond your boundaries, beyond your borders, and will go beyond anywhere you have ever been in your life. And for us, that's not that amazing, because we live in a world where we can communicate with someone across the world in a matter of seconds. But this was a completely different way of viewing the world, that God could do something through them that would reach the corners of the earth. You could imagine that they felt at a minimum honored that Jesus would invite them to be a part of God's plans in this way, and excited to step into that promise. But sometimes the promise, as beautiful as it is, sometimes the path isn't always as beautiful. And that's what these disciples are about to learn. The promise was great, but the path would be hard. And I want to tell you today that I believe that God has incredible promises for your life. In fact, I don't think there's a person in this room that God does not have beautiful plans and purposes and promises for. If you don't believe that for yourself, let me believe it for you on your behalf. I know the God I serve, I've experienced it in my own life, and I've seen it in countless other lives as well. God has great plans and purposes for your life. But on the other side of the coin, let me be real with you. The path will sometimes be really hard. The path won't always be predictable or linear or up and to the right all the time. In fact, sometimes the greatest seasons of growth that you will experience, if not every great season of growth you experience, will come as the result of walking hard paths. If you talk to someone with big faith and you ask them, how did you get such big faith? I guarantee you they're going to tell you they had some big fights. If you want big faith, you're going to have to face some big fights in the process. And that's what happens with these early followers of Jesus. The path and the promise did not seem to align. It reminds me of the popular phrase from the Stoic Marcus Aurelius, where he said, the obstacle is the way. The obstacle is the way, and that's not a typo. He didn't say the obstacle is in the way. He said the obstacle is the way. In other words, the thing that feels like it's blocking you might actually be the very thing that in our faith we believe God is using to move you forward. Sometimes the obstacle is the opportunity. Sometimes it is the best way for God to get you where He's calling you to go, to get you to the promises and purposes that He has for you. And that's where these first followers of Jesus are. The promise was great, the path was not. Have you been there? Maybe you're there right now. Maybe you've set up camp on the path that has been brutal for some time. And I don't know how long the path will be, but I do know this, that if you stop walking, you'll never find out where it leads. And so today I want to invite you to keep walking and trusting and believing that the path, as hard as it may be, will be worth it when you reach the promise. In Acts chapter 8, if there's anything that we can grab a hold of and learn today, it's this, that in the hands of God, your setback becomes your setup for something good. That in the hands of God, your setbacks, which you will have some, they will become setups for something good in your life. So today I want to talk to people who find themselves in the gap between the promise and the path, from where you thought you would be and where you actually are right now. And what do we do when life gives us a lot of disappointment and detours? If you're taking notes today, I want you to write this first point down, and it's this, that in God's hands, your pain becomes the prelude to your best chapter yet. That in God's hands, your pain becomes the prelude to your best chapter yet. Let's go ahead and dive into Acts chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. It says this: Saul was one of the witnesses, and he agreed completely with the killing of Stephen. Now, for those who don't know, you weren't here last week, Stephen, one of the early followers of Jesus, he was stoned to death, killed by Saul. He was the first martyr of the early church, and this sort of began this new chapter of struggle and pain in the early church. It says this: a great wave of persecution began that day, sweeping over the church in Jerusalem. And all the believers, except the apostles, were scattered through the regions of Judea and Samaria. Some devout men came and buried Stephen with great mourning. But Saul was going everywhere to destroy the church. He went from house to house, dragging out both men and women and throwing them into prison. Chapters 1 through 6, the title of that sort of era of the church probably would have been joy, celebration, anticipation. But Acts 8 opens a new chapter that we might call grief and struggle. Stephen had just been killed. The church is being persecuted. The church that was gathered is now scattered. Saul is going from house to house, dragging men and women and dragging them to prison. And Luke says the church was scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. This was far more than an inconvenience. This was a disruption. This was fear. This was loss. This was pain. This was struggle. This was disappointment. And this is where I think we need to pause and recognize something and be really clear about it. And I want to be especially clear up here. And that is that I don't believe that God caused their suffering. The scriptures are actually really clear that Saul was the one behind the suffering of the early church. And that's really important to understand. Because what the church would learn is that he may not have caused the suffering that they were experiencing, but he was also not confined by their suffering. And that matters because when life breaks open and when things hit the fan, and most of us, we assume one of a few things. We either assume God has lost control, God has stopped caring, or maybe there's just no God at all. And Acts 8 gives us another possibility, door number 4, in the midst of trouble and disappointment that we can walk through. And what Acts 8 begins to show us is that we can believe, even in the midst of our disruption and disappointment, that God is still present, that God is still working, that God is still writing, that God's silence does not mean his absence. That in God's hands, Acts 8 will show us that pain can become the prelude to something you've never experienced before, ever in your life. In fact, this is something we see again and again and again in Scripture. Do you know the book of Job? Some of us, we've heard that story, right? You have a guy named Job. He lost children. He lost his wealth. He lost his health. He went through immense suffering. And sometimes we hear people be like, oh, now I know what Job feels like after a breakup. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you don't know what Job feels like. But what's interesting about the book of Job, I've always found fascinating, is that there are quite a few rabbi scholars that believe Job was actually the first book ever written that is in the scriptures. And the reason they believe that is they almost say it's like a parental advisory warning sticker, on the front of, see, that aged me a little bit or dated myself, but it's like this warning that Job was the first book, and it was almost like the author was saying, let me warn you, life's going to be hard. Let me just warn you, you're going to go through some things. Job, he lost a lot. He lost everything. And it was 37 chapters of silence, then God spoke in chapter 38. So it's almost like the writers of Job is saying, hey, there's going to be moments, chapters of silence, but God will speak, and God will intervene and redeem what has been lost. And we see this pattern all throughout Scripture, this idea that pain shows up before provision, pain shows up before power, pain shows up before the breakthrough, right? Joseph has a pit before he's ever in the palace. Israel is in the wilderness before they're ever in the promised land. David is hiding in caves before he ever has a crown. Jesus even has a cross before resurrection. And it doesn't mean that pain is good. And I don't think we need to pretend that pain is good. It means that God is sovereign and redemptive and that he can take what is real loss, real pain, real struggle, and he uses it somehow in this mysterious way as material to do amazing things, beautiful things, holy things in your life. It's like what Paul says in Romans 8:28. God works in all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. Notice, Paul doesn't say God causes all things. I think that's a misconception. but he says he can work all things. Meaning that there's nothing you can ever face in your life that God cannot reshape and remold into something redemptive and beautiful. And maybe part of the way that God uses pain this way is because pain does something that comfort really can't do, right? Like pain strips away our illusions, doesn't it? Pain gives us clarity almost instantly. Pain exposes what we've been leaning on. Pain reveals what our idols actually are. Pain gets underneath our rehearsed answers. Pain drives us to pray for real and totally surrendered. There's something about pain that brings us to a place of deep, real surrender to God that comfort really can't or doesn't do. C.S. Lewis, he put it this way. He says, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. Not because God enjoys pain, he doesn't, but because pain gets our attention in a way comfort does not. But still, I think we have to be careful here. I want to be real careful here. I'm not saying the cancer diagnosis is good. I'm not saying that the betrayal or the affair, wasn't it wonderful? That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying your battle and your mental health is good. I'm not saying that that tragedy is awesome or easy. I'm not diminishing it in any way. What I am saying, though, is that Scripture, while never asking us to call evil or brokenness good, it does invite us to trust that evil and brokenness will not be final. Like the Scriptures, when you read it, Jesus himself never assured us a pain-free, easy life. And if there's ever a pastor who tells you otherwise, he's not telling you the truth. And I just want to save you from some heartache. Even when you follow Jesus, you will experience pain and troubles in your life. Sometimes because you're following Jesus, you will experience some pain and troubles in your life. And the Scriptures never say that you should pretend that it's good, but the Scriptures invite us to understand that pain and evil and brokenness will not be final. Sometimes what felt like the worst thing becomes the beginning of one of the best things God ever did in your life. You thought it was the worst thing that relationship ended. And yet years later, you realize God in his mercy pulled you out of something that was unhealthy. You thought losing that job was the worst thing. Your life was over. But later you realized that if you didn't lose your job, you would have played it safe and never pursued what it is you were truly called to do. See, not because it was painful, but because it was beautiful. God knows how to bring beauty out of what was truly painful. He makes beauty from the ashes. He refuses to waste your pain. See, your pain, it may not be the period in the story. It's just the comma. And God wants to finish the sentence in your life. But so many of us treat pain like the period. That this is the end of it. This is as good as life is going to get. This is as far as I'm going to go. And while God can do many, many things, he can do, I guess, all things you could say. Actually, I would say there's one thing God can't do, and that sounds heretical to say, but bear with me. There's one thing God cannot do. God cannot choose on your behalf what you will do with your pain. Like that is a decision that only you have the power to choose. What will I do with this pain? And if you say, God, I will trust you with this pain, God promises I won't waste it. That I will use it and leverage it and shape you as a result of it. In God's hands. In God's hand, your pain becomes a prelude. But the second thing is this, that in God's hands, your pain becomes purpose. Your pain can become purpose. Acts chapter 8, verse 4, the story continues. It says, but the believers who were scattered, they preached the good news about Jesus wherever they went. It's kind of amazing if you think about it, right? Stephen was killed for declaring the message of Jesus. The church was now being persecuted for teaching about the message of Jesus. You would think this might be a good time for the church to say, let's tone it down a few notches, right? Let's chill for a season. Let's go into hiding for a season. Let's calm down because this thing, like preaching Jesus is getting us into a lot of trouble right now, but they don't. They don't. Such courageous faith. But then Luke tells us that they have been scattered and they preached the word wherever they went, which is astonishing because the thing that looked like it would stop the movement of the gospel, the persecution they experienced, that very thing, that persecution was now spreading the movement of the gospel. What scattered them now sent them. What disrupted them now deployed them into a greater level of God's purposes in their life. They didn't know it. Maybe they did, but I doubt it. That in this moment, Acts 1:8 was happening. Jesus said, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And now what is happening? The message of Jesus is going beyond Jerusalem and Judea, and we'll see here in a moment, reach Samaria. They're literally in the middle of God's promise, and maybe they don't even know it. I want to encourage somebody, I don't know, it's not in my notes, but let me tell you, some of you are in the promise of God right now. It doesn't feel like it, but you're there. It's unfolding, and you're going to look back in hindsight, and you're going, oh my God, like God was with me the whole time. Have you had those moments before where you look back and you're like, I was freaking out in the middle. I felt totally abandoned in the middle, but then you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, if that didn't happen, then this wouldn't have happened. Then I wouldn't have be where I am right now. So some of you, you're in the promise, even though it's painful. That's what's happening to these early followers of Jesus. And I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this. Like, I'm not standing up here as somebody who's like, I've mastered the pain thing. I haven't. Like, I need to work on it, because maybe you pray what I pray sometimes in the middle of disappointing seasons, and that prayer is, how do I get out of this? Right? Like, maybe you go and you ask somebody to pray for you, and you're like, hey, I need you to pray for God to end this ASAP, like yesterday. It needs to happen now. But I wonder if there's a more courageous, faith-filled prayer you can pray. And maybe that prayer is, God, what purpose might you be shaping through my pain? Like, instead of saying, God, get me out of this pain as quickly and comfortably as possible, I get it. What if we actually ask the question, God, what purpose might you be shaping through my pain? Because some pain, it doesn't just wound you. Some pain sends you. The grief you walk through can become compassion that you carry. Man, when you've walked through grief, you know how to sit with somebody in theirs. And when maybe you have a story of finding freedom from addiction, that becomes a testimony that gives another person fighting addiction hope. The disappointment you experience may be the place where God births a deeper calling. Your pain may not only be something God heals, but most often it's actually something God uses. In fact, maybe for some of us, we need to go, God, what's my purpose in life? Maybe you need to ask the question, where have I experienced the most pain? Where have I experienced the most pain and have overcome and endured it? Because you're not the only one who's experienced that. Now you can take your healing to somebody who finds himself in a similar situation. See, this is what God does. God takes your pain and he turns it into purpose. So instead of asking God, when will this be over? Let's start asking God, what might you be doing through this? Who might you help me love better through this? Where might you send me as a result of what it is I'm walking through? Because in the hands of God, your pain not only becomes a prelude, but it also becomes purpose if you'll entrust him with it. The third thing is this, and final thing is this, that in God's hands, your pain can become the place joy finds you. This is my favorite point of all the three, and it's also probably the hardest to believe. That in God's hands, your pain can actually become the place that joy finds you. And we see this happen unexpectedly in Acts chapter 8. Verse 5, it says this, Philip, for example, went to the city of Samaria and told the people there about the Messiah. Now, let me just pause and give you a little bit of context of this first century world. Samaritans were seen as half-breeds. They were seen as a lower class. And Jewish men, women, and children would do everything to avoid Samaritans. In fact, history tells us that many of them would actually travel around Samaria just to avoid even being in the same place as a Samaritan. This is why it was so radical when Jesus didn't go around Samaria like every other Jewish rabbi. He actually went through Samaria and spoke to Samaritans. He was breaking down walls of really racism between the Jewish people and the Samaritan people. And what we see here is now Philip is going to the last place anyone thought he should go, to the last people anyone thought God could do anything good in. And here's what happens. It says, crowds listened intently to Philip because they were eager to hear his message and see the miraculous signs he did. And many evil spirits were cast out, screaming as they left their victims. And many who had been paralyzed or lame were healed. So there was great joy in that city. Everyone say that city. That city. I love that last line. I love that last line because I wonder when Luke wrote it down. I wonder because he didn't have a typewriter or a computer where he could like italicize certain words. I wonder if Luke was actually saying like there was great joy, not in there was great joy in that city, but he was going like there was great joy in that city. You know the difference, right? There was great joy even in that city. Great joy even in Samaria. It wasn't just that city. To them, it was that city. in that place that they least expected it, in that place that they had been avoiding, in that place that was a source of tension, in that place that was a source of struggle and friction. Somehow, in the midst of their pain and struggle, they found joy even in that place. Man, this is a message for somebody today. That is the hope of this passage. Joy showed up in the place that they would not have picked. Joy showed up in the place that they would have otherwise avoided. And I think some of us need to hear that word, because we've quietly convinced ourselves that joy is waiting only on the other side of our old life when we get it back. That joy is only waiting for us on the other side of struggle. That joy is waiting for us on the other side of that promotion. That joy is waiting for us finally when we get married. That joy is waiting for us when we finally hit a new financial bracket. That joy is awaiting for us on the other side of whatever it is you think will bring you joy. This story challenges all of that, because what it tells us is that you can have joy anywhere, even in that place. Like even in that place. What if joy is not waiting in the life you lost? What if joy is not waiting for you in the life you want? What if joy is actually waiting for you right now in the life you currently have, even if it's not the life you planned? Tim Keller, he said this. He said, "The joy of the Lord happens inside sorrow. It does not only come after sorrow." Sure, it's pretty awesome when the sorrow ends and when the pain is behind you. But it doesn't mean it's the only place joy can be felt. As Ethan said earlier, joy, in fact, may be the way that we defy pain, the way we defy struggle. Joy is our way of saying, I see you, I recognize the pain, but it won't be the final chapter. This is why one author in the scriptures, he says, the joy of the Lord is our strength. He doesn't say the joy of the Lord is our prize. The joy of the Lord is our strength. What does that mean? It means you're going to need strength in the middle of the battle. And how did he find it? He found it by finding joy, even in that place. Samaria was not the absence of pain. It wasn't the absence of suffering. It was the surprise of joy in the middle of it all. And I wonder if you're in Samaria right now. And you know when you are. Like, I wonder if you're here in this place, and maybe it's the very reason you came here today, is because you have been in that place, and you're just like, I gotta get out of here. This wasn't the plan. This isn't what I expected, nor is it what I want. I guess I want to encourage you, don't write off that place too quickly. Because what if God is trying to show you a deeper level of joy that you could have never known or experienced had you only been in the comfortable places? What if God is wanting to meet you in that place to show you something about himself and about yourself that you would have never known had you not walked through your own Samaria? See, in God's hands, your pain can become a place that joy finds you. And so that leaves us, I guess, with the question, how do we respond when we are in that place? That place between our expectations and our experiences. Let me just give you 3 quick things that we can begin to do. The first thing is this: to hand God your pain. To hand God your pain. What do I mean by that? I mean, stop minimizing it. I don't know who told you that you need to just shove it down and act like it doesn't exist, or whoever told you just got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and carry on. No, I want to give you permission to feel it. In fact, I don't really believe anyone can heal from anything they refuse to feel. Feeling is part of the healing journey. So what is the pain? What is that place that you have been in? I want to invite you this morning to say, God, here it is. God, here's this place, and I don't know why I'm here, how long I'll be here. I certainly don't want to be here anymore, but I'm here, so I'm going to give this to you. Because I really, really, really need you to meet me in this. Hand him the pain. Because if you could have handled it yourself, you would have done it by now, wouldn't you? It's okay to say, I just can't carry this on my own. And I need God. Second thing is this: Second thing is ask him for the purpose. Don't ask him for the exit. Ask him for the purpose. What's the purpose, God? What do I get out of this? Lord, what are you doing in this? Where are you sending me through this? God, who might you help me love better now through this? What kind of purpose could come through this? Man, that turns the tables on pain when you're all of a sudden thinking like, I'm not going to waste this. I'm going to make purpose out of this. Like, so what purpose, God, are you bringing out of this? Take some time and say, God, here it is, but what are you trying to do through me through this? And third is this. Look for joy in the struggle. Look for joy in the struggle. Try not to assume that joy lives in the life you lost or in the life you long for. But look for God's presence in the place you didn't plan. Look for signs of grace in the middle of disruption. Look for great joy in unlikely places because it's there. God is with you. And if you just slow down long enough to allow the eyes of your heart to open, you'll see it. Some of us we're trying to power our way through, and maybe the best thing you can do is just pause. Maybe today, what does that look like? Maybe it's like going out, that overlook, at Main Post Lawn there near Tunnel Tops Park that overlooks the Golden Gate Bridge. Maybe you just need to go take one of those big red chairs and just sit there. No music, no movement. Just be still. And just allow God to meet you in that place and maybe recognize even the smallest of things that might bring you just a little bit of joy. Let's look for joy even in that place. Yeah, let's end there. Can we close our eyes over this room?